Man rescues an abandoned puppy only to find out later that it's not a dog. This incredible story happened in Russia. As Andrei Musienko was walking in the nearby forest on a cold winter morning in Siberia, he suddenly heard an unusual noise. He followed the sound as it didn't seem too far away. It didn't take long for him to find the source. A small, frightened animal lay snuggled up against a tree. It was a puppy. He didn't look more than a few weeks old. Andrei couldn't imagine why anyone would abandon a helpless puppy in the middle of the forest. The sight broke his heart. The man moved closer to the shaking animal and picked up the puppy. He held him tightly in his arms, hoping his hands would provide some warmth to the poor, hypothermic animal. Then he rushed home, pulled out some blankets and wrapped up the freezing puppy. After a few minutes in Andrei's care, the puppy had stopped shaking. It looked like he was already feeling better. The man had only known the puppy for a few hours, but he realized he had gained the animal's trust. He decided to keep the puppy. But you won't believe what happened in the following weeks. It was a female and he called her Akela. Over the next few months, Akela grew larger and larger. Andrei noticed that his new pet had a big appetite. It had been like that since day one, but Akela's hunger only grew over time. Andrei knew that young animals need a lot of nutrients. Nevertheless, Akela's eating habits continued to surprise the man. As Akela grew taller, her facial features seemed to become sharper and her body shape broader. One thing that increasingly concerned Andrei was Akela's race. It was a secret he couldn't solve. The man had some friends who were dog owners, but they too had no idea and were just as confused as Andrei himself. He sent people pictures and videos of Akela in various stages, but his efforts were in vain. As a last resort, Andrei turned to an animal expert. He asked for a personal meeting. When they arrived, the expert's jaw dropped. The man couldn't believe his eyes. Andrei had believed all along that he was raising a dog, only to later find out that it wasn't a dog at all. It turned out that Akela was a wolf. And to make things even more interesting, Akela wasn't just any wolf, but a Eurasian gray wolf. This species is one of the largest wolf species on Earth. After discovering the true nature of his beloved pet, the man had to decide what to do next. News of the man raising a she-wolf quickly spread throughout the area. When she finally reached the local zoo, Andrei was bombarded with calls and emails trying to convince him to hand Akela over to the zoo. After all, the opportunity to acquire a tamed wolf of this species did not often arise. The fact that the zoo could feature one of the largest wolves in the world would certainly attract many visitors. But Andrei had already heard many stories about zoos, and he was reluctant to enter a zoo, let alone give his girlfriend there. However, his alternative was not very attractive either. Many people encouraged Andrei to release Akela back into the wild. Some of them were worried about the safety of Andrei and his neighborhood. But Andrei was unsure because there was no guarantee that Akela would be able to cope in the forest. She would suddenly be completely on her own after spending her entire life in Andrei's care. She didn't know how to navigate the wilderness alone and had never learned to hunt. She would probably starve to death soon. Plus, there were poachers in the area who would just wait for Andrei to release his rare wolf. Even though some people claimed that this was the only right course of action, Andrei refused away. Akela had already spent so much time with Andrei and gotten used to her new lifestyle that it only made sense to let the wolf stay with him. It didn't feel right to give her away. And that's why Andrei decided to follow his heart and keep the she-wolf. But the story was to take an unexpected turn. When local authorities heard about the unusual case, they were forced to take action. They argued that it was not safe to keep a wolf in a residential area and that it needed to be housed in an appropriate enclosure. Despite Andrei's efforts to explain that he had raised Akela since her rescue and had a close bond with her, The authorities remained adamant. Since Andre didn't have the financial means to build Akela an appropriate enclosure, her fate was sealed. A truck accompanied by wildlife officials came to pick Akela up. The wolf was loaded into a transport cage and taken away. Andre was deeply saddened when he saw his beloved wolf drive away. Akela appeared confused and frightened as she was loaded into the truck. When she arrived at the wildlife station, Akela was placed in an enclosure. But over time her condition worsened. She avoided contact with other wolves and spent most of her time lazing in a corner of the enclosure. Andre visited her regularly, but it was obvious that Akela was not happy. Andre couldn't stand his wolf's sadness. He knew he had to do something, so he decided to share Akela's story on social media. He talked about their first meeting, their time together and their deep bond, and about the injustice that Akela was now locked in an enclosure far away from him. The story spread like wildfire and people from all over the world were touched. Many were willing to donate to finance a proper enclosure for Akela. Within a very short time, Andre had enough money to build a large, species-appropriate enclosure that would meet the needs of a wolf. After long negotiations with the authorities, Andre finally received a special permit to keep wolves and he was allowed to bring Akela back from captivity. The joy of seeing each other again was indescribable. Akela couldn't contain her joy. It was an incredible moment. In her familiar surroundings, Akela immediately felt more lively and happier. In the meantime, Andre has built even more enclosures and rescued even more wolves, which now live together with Akela in the specially built sanctuary.